Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I do want to say that I will be splitting my time with the member from Chatham-Kent-Leamington. Well, Canadians have waited more than 2 years for the Liberals to finally table a budget, and I would have to argue that it certainly wasn't worth the wait. It may have been worth the wait if you were looking to build back bigger. Bigger government, bigger spending, bigger programs, bigger deficit, but bigger, unsustainable debt. When Canadians were looking for a budget that would outline a path to recovery, what we got was a budget focused on re-election, which is truly unfortunate for Canadians because we're the ones who are going to be paying for the Liberals' re-election budget. This was not a recovery budget that Canadians were waiting for. This is a budget that puts unsustainable and suffocating debt on Canadians for generations to come. And I want to put it in perspective. By next year, this current Prime Minister will have racked up more debt than every Prime Minister in Canadian history combined. Every single Prime Minister in our history. Let that sink in. And that's including the current Prime Minister's father, who had racked up a debt that took decades to try and get under control. But this was a budget focused on announcements, photo ops, and more than likely broken promises. Because what the Liberals are very good at is marketing, but what they're very bad at is actually the reality of having to follow through on those promises and the reality of government. I want to start off the issues that I'm going to try and address in my speech with the childcare announcement. I don't think there's any question that Canadians are interested in a childcare program, especially with the changes that we've experienced as a result of COVID-19. However, once again, the Liberals make, I think, their 9th or 10th promise on a national childcare program, and I'm going to guess this is their 9th or 10th promise waiting to be broken. This is the 9th time, let's say, that the Liberals have promised a national childcare program, but they forget to mention the fine print. The fine print is that it is a 50-50 split with the provinces and territories. So $30 billion over 5 years, but it's contingent on the part of the provinces and territories stepping up to split that cost. I'm not sure if the Liberals who, again, believe the budget will balance itself, has taken a look at the current financial situation of the provinces and territories that have been absolutely devastated by this pandemic. Very few provinces are going to have the resources to kick in and pay their share of the Made in Ottawa National Childcare Program. Not to mention, many provinces and territories will balk at having an Ottawa Knows Best childcare program that doesn't work for their families. In fact, it doesn't work for most Canadian families who do shift work in rural and remote communities, or would much prefer an aunt, a grandfather, a neighbor to look after their children. Conservatives realized this way back in 2006 when we introduced the universal childcare benefit, because we knew hardworking Canadian families knew how to look after their family and their children much better than Ottawa bureaucrats. That's what Canadian families want to see. They don't want to see a government-regulated childcare program that A, provinces and territories can't afford, but B, doesn't meet their needs. So that's just one program that the Liberals are going to be getting, hoping for all these great photo ops and great headlines, but when it comes down to the fact of actually being able to deliver on this promise, it will be another promise broken. Now, it's clear that the Liberals are doing their regular wedge politics here, trying to pit provinces and territories against one another, and which provinces and territories can afford this child care program. But I do have to admit, I was surprised to see that the Liberals chose a very vulnerable part of our community and our society to also put in a wedge. The Liberals have chosen seniors to be the next wedge topic in this budget. This was a budget where they should have made hard choices, but what they did, especially when it came to seniors, is they chose winners and losers. And seniors under 75 are the losers. What this budget does is it creates a two-tier system for seniors in Canada. There are those seniors who are going to get the 10% increase on their OAS and a $500 bonus in August. Not surprisingly, maybe a few weeks before the Prime Minister drops the writ and calls an election. How can you pick one group of seniors is worthy of help when one isn't? So you have a two-tiered system for seniors, and we know that seniors have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. They are exhausted, they're tired, and in many cases they're scared as a result of isolation and being away from their loved ones as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So instead of ensuring that all Canadians were vaccinated and all provinces had the vaccines and personal protective equipment that they needed, they decided to pick winners and losers when it came to Canadian seniors. And I find that to be incredibly disrespectful to such an important part of our community. Now, Madam Speaker, the next area that I wanted to touch on is obviously, like seniors, very important in my riding of Foothills, and that's the agriculture industry. Once again, the Liberals have failed to show heartfelt support for an agriculture industry that has been hit hard, not just by COVID, but certainly issues outside of its control over the last couple of years. Let's look back a little bit. We had the harvest from hell, we had rail blockades, strikes, lost export markets in India and China that have a very difficult, certainly a serious impact on that industry. But thankfully, in my riding of Foothills, we had a great harvest last year. And there's a lot of optimism as we head into seeding this spring, and we're just wrapping up calving. There is optimism. Until April 1st, on April Fool's Day, when the Liberals announced yet another increase in their carbon tax. Farmers operate in a very small margin. You need all of those variables to match up for you to make a profit and be able to keep operating the following season. By doubling the carbon tax and now announcing that it's going to be up to $170 a ton in the next couple of years is devastating to agriculture that cannot pass on that cost anywhere else because they're the end user. Hessel Kielstra in my riding that owns Mountain View Poultry showed me his carbon tax bills. This was before the increase. To heat his chicken barns in February, $24,000 for the month. This isn't just chump change. So why in this budget did not the Liberals exempt farm fuels and agriculture from the carbon tax? Give them a break, because there's no question agriculture is going to play a critical role, and when we try and dig ourselves out of this massive fiscal abyss that the pandemic has brought upon us, but certainly not assisted by the financial recklessness of the Liberal government even before the pandemic. Because, Madam Speaker, there's no question that agriculture is a key backbone of our economy. And if agriculture is treated poorly and it is wrong, then not much else can go right. And when I talked to many of my farmers when we were talking about this budget and my ranch families, one of the other things that was very frustrating was the lack of a real plan to ensure every rural community has access to broadband. Certainly this was a key issue in just about every rural riding in this country before the pandemic, but there's no question the need to access broadband in every rural community is critical. We must start treating this like a utility. It is not a want, it is a must-have. We must start treating it like electricity, water, because if we want our rural communities to be able to compete on a level playing field with the rest of the world, they must have access to this critical infrastructure. Our farmers are competing on a global market. Our small businesses are now going online, and kids are having to work from home. We cannot have these economic development opportunities in these communities if we don't have access to rural broadband. But I have 1 minute left, Madam Speaker, and I wanted to touch on one thing that's obviously very important to Alberta, and that is the fact that the energy sector is not mentioned once in this budget. And I don't understand why the Liberals don't understand the important impact that our oil and gas sector has on this economy. We are in a very difficult fiscal situation, and according to the Canadian Energy Centre, between year 2000 and 2018, the energy sector generated $672 billion in revenue for every level of government. That's $35 billion a year for municipalities, provinces, and the federal government. That cannot be replaced. And we have felt it in Alberta, the disdain for this energy sector. 200,000 lost jobs. Now we are saying that Line 5 is in jeopardy because of this Prime Minister's virtue signaling. Now, unfortunately, Alberta or Quebec and Ontario are going to start to feel the pain that Alberta has felt for a long time.
Questions and comments?